Okay, so the second speaker is Dr. Erdal Küçükyalçın. The title of his talk is Ōtani Kozui, an Ex-Shin Buddhist Patriarch, and his 10-volume A Project for the Rise of Asia. Dr. Küçükyalçın, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. And I apologize from the start because I had to, after my talk finishes, I have to go back to my class, which I have a visitor from Japan. And well, so I'll try to keep it concise so that if the listeners have any questions, they may ask while I'm here, they may write to the chat section. Okay, well, I will talk about Ōtani Kozui, Count Ōtani Kozui, if you may, an interesting personality who had lived through Meiji, Taisho, and Showa periods, and witnessed the turbulent times of his age and the change his society went through. From an early modern society, let's say, to a modern society, and the clash between, great powers in the Second World War. So he is an interesting personality. That's the first thing that I can say. The first time that I got interested in him was before my PhD research, and I realized that he was one of the earliest figures who had come to, Japanese figures who had come to Istanbul. I mean, that's why he was quite a good friend with Yamada Torajiro, and he even was the writer of the inscription at the Ertuğrul Monument in Wakayama Prefecture. And he participated with Yamada to the ceremonies there. He even was active in the establishment of Osaka Turkish-Japanese Business Association, etc. But, the deeper I got into his life, I understood that his life was much more interesting than I would have anticipated. And today I would like to talk about his views and his work that is called Kōa Keikaku, a project for the rise of Asia. It's a monumental book, but it was not that well studied. I mean, I have to focus more on his publication because it has, thousands of pages, but I'll try to introduce the man himself and his work within the context that it was written. Now, Ōtani Kozui, I chose a handsome-looking young Kozui's photograph. This was taken in London when he was young, before he had gone on to his first expedition into Central Asia along the Silk Road, looking for the traces of Buddhism. Ōtani Kozui is more famous in Japan, as he is around the world in the academic circles, for the 3 expeditions he sent to Central Asia. The first one, he participated himself, but the second and third, he sent his disciples. I say disciples because he was an important figure in early 20th century for the Japanese society as a religionist, as the leader of the largest Buddhist domination in Japan. I mean, people talk about Zen, people talk about Nichiren, people talk about different sects of Japanese religious, let's say, outlook, but Jōdo Shinshū, or the Shin Buddhism, is understudied and, well, let's say, it is not that well known, though it is the largest domination in Japan. And he is the 22nd Lord Abbot of Western Honganji, the head temple of Shin Buddhism. Shin Buddhism was divided into two, Western and Eastern Shin Buddhists. They exist. Well, due to some, let's say, quite dramatic changes throughout Japanese history, especially the Warring States period. It was split into two. Originally, it was a single entity. Now, these are a few books that I had been involved in, well, handling Ōtani Kozui, especially about, well, this is our project together with Professor Essenbel and Aoki, Professor Aoki here. In 2010, if I'm not mistaken, we prepared an exhibition here in Pera Museum in the Istanbul Araştırmalar Institute here, Research Institute, and this is a book that I wrote on the occasion of that year. Now, this is Western Honganji. It is the head temple of the largest denomination of Buddhism in Japan, as I just told. Now, Ōtani Kozui is a continuation of the abbots, a genealogy, has a very strong genealogy, binding him to the famous Shinran, Saint Shinran, who lived in the 12th to 13th centuries. And then Renyo, Saint Renyo, who the Shin Buddhists accept as their second organizer of their sect, let's say, just like you know, other religions and sects, even in Turkey, like Bektaşism and etc. I mean, a leader comes and spreads the idea, but then an organizer comes and, you know, spreads it systematically throughout the country. And Renyo was that person. I'll try to give a very short, brief introduction about the structure, about the expansion or extent of this sect to you. Now you can see, as you can see, this is the map of Japan, and Honshu is the main island. And Renyo, Saint Renyo, preached the new, let's say, teachings of Shin Buddhism around this area that I marked in red. These areas are in to the north of Japan, let's say northwestern Japan on the Japan Sea side, Sado Island, Echigo, Echu, Echizen. It started from Kyoto, though, from the capital city, and then it went up to Noto, Kaga, Yoshizaki, etc. I'm mentioning this because it shows us the areas that the let's say peasant society was strong against the samurai or the aristocrats or the citizens and merchants and etc. So Shin Buddhism expanded among the peasants and villagers. On the other hand, this gave it the advantage of being the most populous and popular version of Buddhism that was spread in Japan. This kind of explains many aspects of Japanese, let's say, modern history or modernization, because with the Meiji restoration, the villagers were mobilized, and so did the Western Honganji and the Shin Buddhist denomination. Now, as the leader of this large populace, let's say, he was destined to be a leader within his society. Now, his marriage was, of course, very important, and it was arranged. And he married to Kazuko Kujo, because the Kujo family, this might be of interest for some of you who might be interested in the history of familial relations, because Kujo family is one of the five families that the Japanese emperors can marry, are allowed to marry. So it was such a big privilege for Ōtani Kozui to be wed to a daughter of Kujo family. Now, this will give him quite a big authority throughout his life. And, well, you see, Sadako Kujo, sister of Kazuko, wife of, spouse of, let's say, Kozui, was married to the crown prince, who was going to be Emperor Taisho. So Empress Teimei, or Teimei Kogo, or with her well, normal name, let's say, Sadako Kujo, is the sister-in-law of Kozui. And the figure in the middle is one of his brothers. And well, he is Ōtani Sonju, or Komyo, with his name of religion. He's called the father of golf in Japan. Actually, he's the designer of one of the earliest, some of the earliest golf courses in Japan. Even, I mean, I showed you the photograph of Western Honganji. There is a large courtyard behind that building. I was astonished to find out in the archives that there was a small golf course behind the temple in the living headquarters of the family. 9-hole of golf course. I'm telling you this because you would be surprised how this family, as a family of religion, was instrumental in introducing modernity to Japan, how influential they were by using their charisma. A younger brother, Ōtani Sonju, was not that active, let's say. He didn't like to be on the front most of the time, but he assumed the role of Takumu Daijin, which means Minister of Colonial Affairs, during the first Konoe government, which Ōtani Kozui would also become a counselor for Asian affairs. A sister, he has a sister, Kujo Takeko. She is a very renowned poetess, an activist of women's liberation, founder of Kyoto Women's College, and the founder of the famous Ashoka Hospital in 1923, and the Ashoka Society for Healthcare of the Elderly, centered around that hospital. On the right, you can see a news telling her arrival, about her arrival from London. You see, the family had very good relations with many English. They had a network in Europe, English elite. Well, he is not a relative, but Shimaji Mokurai is an interesting person because he was sent by the father of Ōtani Kozui to Europe and other Western countries in order to, how do you say, do research on the religious institutions. He's a reverend, Shimaji Mokurai, and he's the very first person who had visited Istanbul, Turkey. But I'm not mentioning him because he visited Turkey. I'm mentioning him because, as a religionist again, he is the one responsible for introducing the concept of secularity, secularism, or laicity to Japan. Seikyo Bunri, the separation between religion and politics. Because the Japanese had experienced the harsh reality of a clash between the Shintoist revivals and the Buddhist establishment. The Buddhist establishment was led by the Shin Buddhists, so therefore by the father of Ōtani Kozui. Ōtani sent him in order to find some materials to fight against the Shintoists. That's why Shimaji Mokurai was all around, and he came to Istanbul too in order to understand how Islam was institutionally, how Islam was structured, and etc. So he's an important personality, and he was one of the let's say mentors of Ōtani Kozui. Now, you can see Ōtani Kozui here as the 22nd Lord Abbot, or the Patriarch of his sect, during an important commemoration ceremony which happened between March and April in 1911. He was young, he was tall and towering and charismatic leader of the whole society. And this is one of the peaks of his popularity. As you can see on the right, there were many people. Well, what I mean by many is literally 1 million people were hosted at the Western Honganji temple there, and everybody was looking at the mouth of Ōtani Kozui. So maybe I believe it was the reason why his free fall started, because he took too much attention from the politicians. Well, that's a long story, but I wouldn't go into details, but he was probably envied by some politicians, probably hated by some reverends, some inner temple politicians, let's say. But also he was criticized for the usage of financial resources of the temple for the reasons that were obvious to him. Many people wouldn't understand why he was spending so much to his expeditions, to his travels abroad, etc. Well, anyhow, he was left alone. In a few years, he was so left alone that he had to leave the country penniless, literally penniless, without a penny in his pocket, to Korea, the nearest port to Japan. After that, he would reascend. He would remake himself like a phoenix and rise to a point that he would be the consul. He was even proposed to be the prime minister of Japan, which he refused. But he was an advisor to the cabinet for the Asian affairs, because he knew Asia and he loved Asia more than anybody else in Japan. He is a self-declared Asianist. I wouldn't, say Pan-Asianist, if I may, but he loved Asia and he promoted. Now, you see, this is the main campus of Rikoku University, which I spent 1 year in Kyoto, and these buildings still stay, the same buildings. And it is the first, well, let's say, modern higher education institution in Japan. It was a precursor for the Rikoku University, and it was not only a religious institution, but also was teaching different sciences and fields. So in 1876, it is one of the earliest institutions in Japan. Now, he is very well known for the expeditions, as I said. I will just, mention the whole thing, just to do a short brief to you. You can see these lines show the routes of Ōtani expeditions. They are concentrated in Central Asia, especially to the areas around Taklamakan and Gobi deserts, and the whole of Silk Road, in order to find the traces of Buddhism, because they had this strong conviction that Buddhism had entered through Central Asia, which it was, as Mahayana Buddhism was, spreading through Central Asia, through Dunghon, to China, and then to Korea and to Japan. So they were trying to find the roots of Buddhism and try to show the Meiji elite that Buddhism is strong, like Christianity. It had strong roots, and it was not alien. It was Japanese, but still having strong connections to the continent. Now, this is a photograph showing the Ōtani expeditions. You can see the many crates carrying numerous artifacts that were harvested throughout Central Asia. And like the Western expeditions that were sent by the British, the Russians, the Germans, the French, for example, Orelstein, Sven Hedin, well, you name it, many of them, Albert von Lecoq, they were sent there. And you can see some samples to give you an idea about the things that they collected from the area, like these some, tribal wares and etc. Some textiles. And I do give this an importance because they were also, the Japanese expedition was, they were also collecting plant samples from the area. Now, this is a photograph showing Sven Hedin, the famous explorer, Swedish, but he represented Germany in his expeditions. Sven Hedin with Ōtani Kozui and his wife, Kazuko, hosting Hedin in Kyoto within the temple grounds before sending a new expedition to Central Asia in 1908. Now, the reasons for Ōtani expeditions, according to him, Ōtani Kozui, were to clarify the route for Buddhism's expansion towards East and search for its remains, to clarify the conditions Buddhism was in when Islam began spreading, to collect sutras and images of Buddha from ancient Buddhist sites, to solve problems related to geography, geology, and meteorology. This was mentioned in an illustrated catalog for the archaeology of Western regions, which was published in 1915. There is also another publication, a 2 volumes, large publication called Shin Saikiki, which means the new records of the Western regions, an allegory to Xuanzang, who had a 7th century explorer of the same route, who had written a monumental book called the Records of the Western Regions. Now, after he had returned back, he was restless. He loved Asia, and he established a villa. You can see the Villa of Two Joys, Nirakuso, in Kobe, on a mountain called Rokko, with a wonderful view of the Seto Naikai, the inland sea. You can see this building, the Villa Nirakuso, on top of the hill. I'm mentioning this because, as you will see, the building is eclectic, but it shows the vision that Ōtani Kozui has about Asia. It unites Indian, Russian, Egyptian, Arabic, of course, Chinese influences together. He worked with Ito Chuta, the famous architect here, but the main idea was obviously his own. And you can see there's a tennis court, which was, revolutionary in those times, within the courtyard of the building. But most of all, there was a secondary school that he established and chose the students by himself and tried to raise young people who could speak various languages of Asia. And this building is also the start for Turkology, a very deep tradition in Japan, because the very first Japanese nationals who learned Turkic languages were first raised here in Muko Chugaku, the secondary school called Muko. And this is a picture from 1911. These are postcards showing the rooms within this building, for example, this is the Indian style room. Another one is English style room. The other one is Chinese style room and Arabic style room. So he was trying to show the young generations that, you know, Asia, to give them a taste of Asia. But this is not only a nice looking building only. There was an archive here, which he stored many of the artifacts that he brought and his disciples brought from Central Asia. And also it was a school or a research center where the young people were learning the local language and trying to solve and work on, do research on those archives. Now, you can see this is a greenhouse. Within the compound, there were two greenhouses. One of them was dedicated to tropical agriculture, tropical, let's say, products, raised and introduced them to Japan. And the other one was a cold greenhouse, glass house. And they were doing research on how to cultivate, how to raise some, let's say, fruits from cold regions. These were the first places that produced musk melons. He liked to send the musk melons to his friends. Now, he used to call himself, as you can see, this is the passport of Ōtani Kozui, and you can see in the occupation part, he had written agriculture, because at one point, he was ousted by his own sect, let's say, by his own temple. He resigned from his post. It was an unprecedented, unheard of move. He resigned everything and he went to Korea, as I said. And from then on, you will see him as an agriculturalist. And he says, this is his words from one of his writings. He says, at the center of all my deeds lies in the 5 characters of Aji Ya Shu Gi, Asianism. So he believed that Asia should be liberated. But unlike any politicians or his contemporaries, he's a pragmatic personality. He traveled all around Asia, almost all corners of Asia. He established plantations, some farms and ranches, and he produced local food, and he did research on how to raise agricultural products and etc. And the Kōa Keikaku, the Rise of Asia project, was a combination of his experience as well as his travels. Now, after he had left Japan, in a few years, we see him doing these. He established a villa in the outskirts of Shanghai, in the French section, which was largely populated.
Hi, Chris. I'm not sure how long this is going to work with.
Oh, well, how long did I use?
About half an hour.
And who's going what?
You still have 7 minutes at least.
So why is somebody asking me? I'm not sure who's going to work.
I don't know. You can go on.
Well, that was a surprise. I think it was a mistake. Mistaken, somebody was unmuted, huh? I guess.
Probably.
Okay. Anyway, I'll try to pace up. He established in Java Island, in Taiwan. He opened schools for the Japanese children in China. He established a publication company. He even came to Turkey, you know. He established a silk weaving company, a factory in Bursa. But before that, he did one of the earliest foreign direct investments to Turkey, Turkish Republic, in Ankara. where the presidential palace is at the moment right now, which is called the Gazi chiefly, Gazi ranch or there. And he established a company together, partnering with the founder of Turkish Republic, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. I mean, I was surprised to find all these. What he was trying to do was to help the new republic to boost its economy via agriculture. So he was a physiocrat, if I may call him. He was an Asianist, but he was a physiocrat in the meaning that François Quesnay in the 18th century started. You know, he was believing that the basis of any economy should be agriculture, should be to feed its people. For peace and prosperity, we need agriculture, he would say. So this is these are some photographs from his plantations in Java, and these are some plants that he, you know, value-added plants that he raised there, and he also introduced them to Ankara, by the way. And this is the book, or well, he is old now, quite different than what we saw at the start. That you know, but he was a very tall person compared to his contemporaries. He was 177 centimeters, so he was towering among all. And this is these are some pages that you can see. But here, at the introduction to the first volume, he's saying, this is showing how he, how he saw the whole endeavor. Destroying plants, ruining mountains and rivers, closing them down as we did until now, will not lead to the peace of future generations. The ancient sage king Yu the Great had created the 9 provinces in China, prepared irrigation canals, conquered the water and soil, and with his princely deeds he brought food for the people. His works were so great that his light still shines today. After all, doesn't politics exist for supporting the people? To support it, the politics first has to correct itself morally and value life. So, well, this kind of summarizes his view of Asia and politics and agriculture and economy, prosperity, etc. So, in these volumes, we find tons of information about the climate, about the soil, about the plants, plantation, endemic plants, and value-added plants, and decorative plants, and everything. I mean, he did such a meticulous work on learning local environment, ecology, and you name it, drainage systems and river systems and transportation and harbors and anything, in order to establish and propose to the Japanese government, because he was a counselor too, a different way of handling Asia and growing together with Asia. You see, these show statistical research on the winds in the area. As you can see, it's showing eastern China and Taiwan and southern Japan and Borneo, Sumatra, those areas. He even proposed a new capital city for China. This is the area that he's proposing. It is nowadays, it's a city, a small town of a population of 600,000 people. It is the Changxing County in the Zhejiang province of modern China. There are he's counting lots of reasons why it should be there. Well, I'm not sure if he's heard. It seems he was not, but anyhow, it's such a big, grandiose plan to move the capital there, because there is a lake here too. You can see the table of contents. I mean, there are many pages and there are many table of contents there, but I'll give you some samples here. Climate, winds and typhoons, all tropical, let's say, weathers and etc. So it's, well, I thought it might be better, easier to understand, to give his visuals, because this shows the eastern part of the Yellow River and where and how some transportation harbors, ports should be made according to his proposal. You can see these areas. Okay. Well, I took this page because you can see the plants here written in with their scientific names in Latin. Some are endemic and some are proposed by Ōtani. And this is also, you know, a general picture of the region. But here, at the start of the volume that is about agriculture on the tropical agriculture, I would say. Tropical agriculture, the name of the title of this volume. Here, the first sentence is interesting. He says, "No wa kuni no motonari." Agriculture is the basis of the country, he says.
Mm.
And well, okay, I'll wrap it up. Let's see. Okay. Now, yeah. I wanted to take this because this is interesting. He's saying, "Kogyo rikkoku bakusu." This is strong. I mean, every now and then he had a very strong wording, phrasing. He says, "No, kogyo rikkoku bakusu." It means I condemn, I protest the theory of the doctrine of kogyo rikkoku. A country should rise on the basis of industrialization. On the contrary, he says, a country should prioritize agriculture. I mean, this is interesting, and well, obviously, it is a railroad project for Eurasia. It is called Owa Odan Tetsudo, which means Trans-Eurasian Railroad Line. The black and white, as you can easily understand, were already established railroads, but the red parts are proposed by Ōtani Kozui. Mm-hmm. It is especially meaningful at a time when China is proposing. Oh, sorry, just a moment. Sorry. Belt and Road Initiative and Railroad, Silk Road, etc. This book was published in 1939 to 1940, and this is the 4th volume. Okay, and the whole thing was to combine or to bind this railroad, this new project, with the Baghdad, Istanbul, Berlin Railroad. You see here, Baghdad is the point where Turkish Ottoman Railroad was heading towards, and this line in dots is aiming to go there. Now, one final thing about this railroad. This book was published well, shortly after Ōtani Kozui's Kōa Keikaku, it was written by Yumoto Noboru, one of the top bureaucrats in the railroad department of the Japanese government. And you can see that he's also referring to the same project. So it was, I don't know, it could have been possible. We don't know what would happen if that railroad was realized, project was realized, but it was discussed in the circles within the Japanese government. Now, Ōtani Kozui finally died in Beppu, Oita, in northern Kyushu, and there's a very small. He didn't like to, own much. Very small kinenkan, a little museum in Beppu. You can see his, let's say, what is left from him or by him. Some thousands of pages of writings about the agriculture, about his views on Asia, about anything that he was interested in. He was a prolific writer, and he was a thinker. He was a religionist. He was a public opinion leader. He was an entrepreneur. He was an Asianist. He was well, it was very difficult for me to formulate who he is. But finally, I would say that he was an Asianist with a bias on agriculture. And these are photographs. I had the privilege to bring some of his material to our exhibition that we held in Istanbul, as I told you at the start of my presentation. And I brought a very valuable card of his from this museum to Istanbul. And it was the card of Sun Yat-sen, the founder of modern China. And it was the only thing that he brought, he could bring from China when he escaped, forced by his disciples to escape after the war. He would have stayed back in China if you left him alone, but he had to return back. He was ill, but the only thing that he could bring back was that card. And finally, Tokutomi Soho, the famous intellectual and the founder of Kokumin Shimbun, is a very good friend of Ōtani Kozui, and there are many letters in correspondence between the two. And he is the one who had written the book called The Life of Ōtani Kozui. He published it in 1956. And there he defines Kozui's goal in life, 2 goals, he says: to promote Buddhism, and by doing that, to help East Asian peoples attain spiritual peace, to open all kinds of resources in East Asia, to improve the living standards of East Asian nations, help them attain their self-sufficiency, and thus end the colonial rule. So, well, this is how Ōtani Kozui was introduced by Tokutomi Soho. And one final word before, if I may, one final word from his Kōa Keikaku, I want to quote. He was protesting his contemporaries, the politicians, again at the end of the Kōa Keikaku, strongly. He was saying, Japan has to leave its prejudiced opinion. It's called hekiron, which is a strong word in Japanese, about China. Japan and China should grow together. More research on China with deeper knowledge of the language is needed. Quote, both the government and the people think China should be a raw material supplier and Japan the manufacturer. This is a stupid argument. This word is also strong because guran means stupid argument. Both should rise together by complementing each other. The solution is not conflict, but harmony, he would say. Okay, well, thank you for listening. This is my presentation.